Emilie searches the bed for Robbie with her hands. She opens her eyes to find him gone. She gets up to shower and heads out to the garage. Emilie kneels down and looks at him under her car. You know, in the last 2 months, I can count the number of times I've woken up next to you on one hand. He smiles. What time is Gabe gonna get here? She asks. Robbie slides out from under the car. Not until tomorrow afternoon. I'm gonna grab him a few things before he gets here. He stands to give her a kiss and rubs a greasy finger down her nose. Really? She says, trying to wipe off her face. Back at S.H.I.E.L.D. HQ, Coulson is in his office on screen with Director Mason. Have you had a chance to look at the file I sent over? Asks Mason. I took a peek. Coulson walks over to his desk and pulls out the file. What's so special about this Hyde character? Just looks like some guy who cooked up a new street drug. That mugshot of him that you see there was before developing the drug, informs Mason. Coulson finds another photo taken from a security camera of a man slightly taller than the one in the previous photo with a grotesque build. The one you're looking at now is after. I see where he got the name. He's a monster. Not just him. Everyone that takes that drug. He's been using addicts to test it out, and there have been reports of it being distributed by some street gangs. I'll run through everything. Keep you posted, says Coulson, placing the file back down on the desk. What are Emilie and Robbie up to? Asks Mason. They're picking up where they left off. Taking it a day at a time, I would assume. The director sits back in his chair. Are they alone? I have a team keeping tabs, just in case something should arise. Very good. Well, I'll let you get back to things there. They say their goodbyes and cut transmission. Coulson takes a seat and starts studying the file. The next day, during the start of his spring break, Gabe gets settled in with Emilie and Robbie. Wow, you guys did great, he says, walking around his room. I'll be right back, says Robbie. Emilie shoots him a look, thinking he's going out for a ride with the writer. I'm just grabbing something out of the charger, he says, holding his hand up in surrender as he leaves. Thanks, Emilie, says Gabe. It's nothing, she responds. You guys are like family. I'm glad I could be here for you. Robbie comes back in with a small box and hands it to Gabe. He opens it and pulls out a small, slightly charred photo album and baseball glove in perfect condition from when the two boys were younger. S.H.I.E.L.D. found that after the fire, informs Robbie. Gabe starts to get teary-eyed, and Robbie goes to comfort him. Gabe's tears are cut short by laughter. You good? Asks a confused Robbie. Gabe turns towards Emilie, holds up the book, and shows her the first photo in the album. It's the picture he mentioned before the fire of little Robbie racing his Power Wheel in a diaper. Emilie starts to laugh as Robbie takes the album out of his hand. Really, bro? That Friday, Emilie takes the bus home from work so Robbie can take Gabe to a baseball game. After she showers, she pulls out a file from Fitz with all her family history and information. She looks at the photos of her mom and reads all the articles and myths about Nephilim he found in his research from the Vatican files. She hears Robbie and Gabe walk in. How was the game? She asks, walking into the living room. Don't get 'em started, says Robbie. Let's just say if I had been out there, things would have been different, replies Gabe. Since you're home, says Robbie, pulling a set of keys out of his jacket pocket. You up for a ride? He tosses them to her. She looks at the keys to her Mustang. Moment of truth. He opens the door and they head out to the garage. Emilie gets in the car and takes in the aroma, bringing back memories of her parents before she turns the key and fires it up. She gives it a little gas and listens to it roar. Robbie steps into his Charger and fires it up. They take off around the city, cruising for a few minutes before pulling up to a red light. You know where those abandoned apartments are, off Lunesta? He asks, and she nods. You can follow my taillights there. He taunts as he revs his engine and smiles. The light turns green and they take off. Emilie hesitates on the throttle for a moment, not sure if she should push the limits of her father's car. It only takes a second before her confidence is boosted and she floors it. Her hesitation gives Robbie a slight advantage, but she quickly gains lost ground. He just barely makes it to the abandoned apartment building before her. He steps out of his car, smiling with pride. "You get scared?" he says, laughing. "Just a little hesitation. It won't happen again." She walks over and kisses him. "Thank you." Their moment is interrupted by 3 cars pulling into the building's parking lot. Robbie looks on as one of the men exiting the vehicle is a big Hispanic gang member covered in tattoos. Robbie looks away. "Robbie?" asks the man, stepping in front of the headlights as 5 other men step out of the vehicles. "¿Qué pasó? I haven't seen you since you got those 2 G's off me a few years back." "Grumpy," he addresses the man. "Been taking care of some family business." "Yeah, I heard about your brother. It's a shame." Emilie can feel the tension in the air between Robbie and the man he called Grumpy. "Let's go," she says, placing a hand on Robbie's chest. "Oh, baby, he can't leave yet. We were just going to catch up. We go way back. Don't we, Robbie? You remember that time you outran those cops with 30 kilos in your trunk?" he says, reminiscent on an old drug deal. "A little heads up putting it in my trunk would have been nice." "It all worked out," he smiles. "Nowadays we're running something a little more lucrative." He has one of the guys bring him a case from the trunk of one of the cars. He opens it, revealing small vials with a fluorescent blue fluid. "The next step in evolution. I could use another runner behind the wheel." He tries to tempt him. "I put all that behind me." "Too bad. Before you and your girl leave, how about me and you go one more time, for old time's sake?" "That's behind me too." "Really?" "2 G's, tempts Grumpy. Robbie opens Emilie's door and she gets in. 5 G's. "Let's go," says Emilie with a stern look, knowing the man is getting under his skin. "I never took you for a puta, Robbie, much less the type to take orders from one," taunts Grumpy. "Robbie," she warns. "I hope you learned a thing or two from last time," responds Robbie. Emilie looks on in frustration as Robbie gets in the Charger and follows Grumpy to the site of their last race. Emilie gets out of her car and storms over to the Charger. "What are you doing?" "Shutting him up," replies Robbie. "You don't have anything to prove," she insists. "I'll be fine." "That's not what I'm worried about," she warns. "Don't get carried away." "I was driving long before he was riding," informs Robbie before pulling up to the starting line. One of Grumpy's men signals the 2 drivers and they take off. Emilie stays back with the rest of Grumpy's men, waiting for the 2 to return. Grumpy tried to pull a few dirty tricks to throw Robbie off his game, but he still pulled through first. The 2 men exit their vehicles. Grumpy pulls out a stack of bills and hands it to Robbie. "You may have gone soft, but you still know how to drive." Robbie declines the money. "I want you to leave," he says, fiercely. Grumpy, with a vicious smile, steps up to him. "You running things around here?" he asks, threateningly. "Robbie," calls Emilie. "I'm ready to go home." Grumpy stares down at Robbie for a moment, before he turns to get in the Charger. "It's a good thing you rode separate. We don't want her to end up like Gabe." Emilie could see Robbie's eyes light up. She takes a step towards him, but is blocked by Grumpy's crew. Robbie turns enraged and punches Grumpy across the face. The 2 start to brawl, but it's broken up when 2 of Grumpy's men grab Robbie. Emilie, still blocked by the 2 men, tries to break through. One grabs her as she struggles to get to Robbie without using her powers and drawing attention. "Word around town is there's an inhuman known as the Ghost Rider. Drives a black Charger. Kills vatos who cross him." Robbie's glowing eyes are clearly visible to Grumpy. One of the men brings Grumpy a vial out of the case he previously flaunted. He drips the fluid in both eyes. Might want to shield your eyes, little girl. His body starts to twitch and his skin ripples as his big build seems to get bigger. His pupils dilate and he punches Robbie in the stomach. The power of the strike causes him to immediately throw up blood. Grumpy lands another punch, this time across Robbie's face. The two men struggle to hold Robbie as Grumpy lays into him. You want to know about the writer? Asks Robbie, before spitting in Grumpy's face and smiling. Grumpy wipes the side of his face. He lifts Robbie up and slams him into the ground. Emilie grabs onto the two men that were keeping her from Robbie as they look on mesmerized by the fight. She takes a deep breath and releases a small static charge, dropping them to their knees. Sirens blare in the distance. Grumpy looks over at Emilie and then down at Robbie. 5-0, announces one of the guys, pleading for Grumpy to leave. They all jump into their cars and head off. Emilie and Robbie hide near a bridge that is under construction until the roads are clear. When they get back to the house, Emilie gets out of the car and doesn't say a word. Calls out Robbie as she walks into the house. The next morning, she is still obviously mad. She moves around the kitchen, avoiding him as she makes coffee before work. Robbie leans back on the counter in front of the cabinet of cups. Emilie stands there, waiting for him to move. You gonna keep avoiding me, or you gonna let me know what's bothering you? He asked. We have been so good, keeping what we are quiet. And yesterday, you risked everything because you had too much pride to walk away. Is that what you're upset about? Me using my powers? Asked Robbie, not understanding completely why she is mad. I go out almost every night and become the writer. Yes, Robbie, I know. But none of his victims know who you are, she points out. Not everyone in this house is immortal. And the last thing you want is Gabe to know who you are. The day was running smoothly at the clinic. Coulson had a chat with Emilie's boss the day she told him she wanted to return home. He told him Emilie was taken to one of their SHIELD facilities after being believed she was being stalked by an inhuman they were after. Just before 4 o'clock, an older couple comes in with an unresponsive man. He wasn't too old, maybe early 20s. The woman was screaming hysterically as 2 nurses run over to try and assess the situation. Emilie and one of the nurses take the man into a room and lift him onto the table. I can't find a pulse, says the other nurse. Emilie looks at his arm as one of the nurses brings in the defibrillator. She notices needle marks affiliated with drug users. She also notices in his tightly gripped hand a small vial. She discreetly removes it and places it in her pocket. They try their best to resuscitate him. After 2 shocks, the man's body begins to shake and seize. His whole body tenses up and freezes as his veins harden. What the hell? Responds the facility's doctors as he walked in to assess the situation. I've never seen anything like this, says one of the nurses, looking over the body. The doctor pulls out his stethoscope and examines the man. There's nothing we can do. Call it, he says. The young man looked like his body was in a state of tension, his veins large and straining, and felt like they were filled with concrete. I'll call it into the morgue, replies Emilie as she walks to the back of the facility to make a call. Dr. Simmons speaking, answers Simmons. Hey, Gemma, it's Emilie. I'm calling because I think I have something SHIELD might be interested in. Emilie explains the situation about the man who came in and the drugs she believed he had took that resulted in his death. Coulson has been looking into something that sounds like what you're describing. I'll let him know and see about getting a team down there, says Simmons. Coulson is in his office with Mac when Simmons comes in to give him a rundown of Emilie's story. Sounds like the lead we've been looking for. Mac, you and Daisy pay a visit to Emilie. Find out what she knows. Simmons, you and Fitz take care of the body. They arrive in L.A. in under 2 hours and split up. Fitz and Simmons head down to the morgue to have a look at the body, while Mac and Quake head to Emily's place. Emilie answers the door when they arrive. "Hey," she says with a smile, while giving them a hug and inviting them in. "Where's Robbie?" asks Mac. "Garage," she says, pointing him in the direction. Emilie and Quake head into the house and have a seat at the kitchen table. Quake takes a look around. "Nice place. How's it feel being back in the real world?" she asks sarcastically. "I'll admit, it can get a little boring from time to time." Emilie pulls out the small vial and places it on the table. "That's it?" questions Quake. She grabs the tiny container and holds it up. "It only holds 1 milliliter, Emilie states. "Only 1. I don't even know if he took it all at once." "Fitzsimmons can probably tell us once they get what they need from the morgue," informs Quake. "They hate what we are, but they would pay for a drug if it made them one of us." In the garage, Mac stands looking in wonder between the Charger and Mustang. "What, one badass car wasn't enough?" asks Mac when he finds Robbie. "This one belonged to Emily's dad," says Robbie, surprised to see him. "What are you doing here?" he says, while cleaning some of his tools. "Emilie called. She may have stumbled on a lead, something Coulson's been looking into." He looks over Emily's car. "How are things going with you two?" Robbie shrugs. "Getting better at pissing her off." "All men are pretty good at that when it comes to women," says Mac, taking a look around the garage. "You see or hear anything about a new drug on the streets? Maybe take out a few dealers with a new product?" Robbie leans back on the workbench and tells Mac about the drugs Grumpy was showing off the night before. "Coulson has been looking into something. Some scientist who goes by the name of Hyde. He's genetically engineered some kind of drug to make in humans," informs Quake. Mac and Robbie come walking into the house. "There was a guy, Grumpy, with a case of vials last night when me and Robbie were out," informs Emilie. "How many cases did he have?" asks Quake. "Only 1, but there were at least 24 vials in there," she confirms. Mac steps out to call Coulson, who is with May meeting with Director Mason. "Any idea where we can find this Grumpy?" asks Quake. "He runs the east side," says Robbie. "That gives us a lot of ground to cover," says Quake reluctantly. "We better get going." Emilie gives her a hug. "Be careful. If you guys see him, that drug, it hits pretty hard." Mac and Quake head out to meet with Fitzsimmons. That night, Robbie walks into the kitchen and sees Emilie levitating with her legs crossed by the stove cooking. "I'm gonna head out," he says. She doesn't say anything and puts her feet down to stand. He wraps his arms around her and rests his head on her shoulder. "I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking the other night." She sighs, knowing she's being a little dramatic. "I'm sorry too," she says. He kisses her neck and heads out. Gabe decided he had crammed enough for one night in the library. He was pretty sure he would pass his final. On his way out, he saw a flyer for a wheelchair baseball league. He rolled by and hesitated before deciding to grab one of the flyers. When he gets home, something isn't right. Before the doors fully open, he can smell food burning. He goes inside and hears whimpering coming from the kitchen. "Oh my God, Emilie!" He looks down at her laying in a pool of blood in pain. He immediately calls Robbie. Come on," he urges as the phone keeps ringing. Robbie is sitting outside of a liquor store, watching 2 gang members when his phone goes off. He ignores it the first time, figuring Gabe would just call Emilie instead. But then it rings again. "Yeah, Gabe, what's..." He is quickly interrupted. "Robbie, you have to get home now. It's Emilie. She's lost a lot of blood." "What?" Robbie starts up the Charger and speeds to the house.